This is a case of murder. Murder 7 times over.
This is John Weber. He's been asked to defend you.
Been asked to, but I don't particularly want to.
Why don't you go home?
Because your case is so bad, no one else will take it. I read in your file that you were a warder in the prison service. I suggest you find out what's in store for you. Ask them what happens on death row. 164 men were executed last year.
I know what happens on death row. I was at all of the executions.
He dragged the bodies over there and then he lined them up.
He lined up the bodies. Why would he do that?
These warders, they get to know the men that they're going to hang. Anything worse than killing a stranger is killing someone you know.
Shepherds of Butchers was a novel written by Chris Marnowick. Chris was an advocate in South Africa. He represented capital punishment cases in South Africa.
South Africa had a very horrific period of hangings all through the apartheid years.
The book is so powerful and so well documents the process of execution in South Africa at Pretoria Central in the late 80s. I was moved by the book, and I wanted to do the adaptation.
Ostensibly, it is a film against capital punishment.
Our story concerns a young warder of 19 who, in an 18th month period, kills over 200 people, or is involved in the hanging of over 200 people.
Well, I think this is really about a film about young people taken by a society, taught how to kill, and then left to their own devices.
Definitely the death sentence and the hangings, I think, I mean, a lot of people aren't aware of what really happened, especially when it came to the gallows.
I don't think people can believe and will believe that we actually had a system like this.
I wonder if the warrant officer would be kind enough to throw the lever and release the trapdoor.
At the end of the 80s, I spent a lot of time with one of the prisoners on death row and wanted to make a film there at that time, a completely different story. And it was very complicated and too hard to make, and it always stuck with me though. So when I read this, I thought it must be fate.
You want to say thank you to your directors to give you a role like this, that you will feel what you know what happened.
Putting himself aside, Oliver was willing to tell the story from a perspective of both, from a liberal perspective and from a less popular, conservative perspective.
Do you think the state should kill people?
Majority support the death penalty.
Majority supported burning at the stake, witch dunking, crucifixion.
In many cases, the warders were young men, 20 years old or a little older. Many of them got into prison service to avoid going to Angola or Namibia and fighting in the bush wars.
He didn't want to go to Angola and fight in the war and ended up on death row, so there's an irony in that.
And so even though they might have avoided death in the bush or fighting abroad, they encountered slaughter on an even larger scale inside the walls of Pretoria Central.
When this happened, you were working on death row at maximum security prison. Surely you were too young.
Started working there over 2 years ago.
in this case fictional, one of the warders goes out and, in an incident of road rage, kills 7 people, because 7 is the number that were hanged every time, so there's a motif.
The character, when you first read the script, comes across as a very just completely broken human being, and it was only later on, discovering more about the character and other sources, that I discovered a kind of underlying spark beneath him.
Garion is obviously something of a novice in the acting. He was only 18 years old, but when I first saw what he was doing when the camera turned on him and he was in the witness box, I was blown away.
Why didn't you tell me? Before I started hurting my wife.
Mr. Labuskachny.
Before I lost everything. Before I killed 7 people.
Mr. Labuskachny.
Why didn't you tell me?
To me, the story was about uncovering what happened to Leon, and the only person who can uncover what happens to Leon is the lawyer, John Weber, played by Steve Coogan.
John Weber is a successful lawyer in living in the end of the apartheid era, towards the end of the 1980s.
The main focus was to describe John Weber's journey as a human being, how this case affects him personally and his life.
The prosecution has adduced no evidence of a motive, and there appears to be none. We intend to look at the accused's working conditions on death row inside maximum security prison and the events that took place there prior to the incident at the quarry, in order to find the reason for his actions.
This young man, Leon Labuskachny, will almost certainly be hanged if he's found guilty of the murder of these 7 men.
By the time we get to the court scenes, he's got 2 years of hell and another 6 months in a jail cell behind him. So you've got to know what all those thoughts were after the time he was spending in that cell.
Everyone sitting in that courtroom, in a sense, is in the middle, is sort of the eye of Leon's storm.
Mr. Labuskachny, you told the court about your first hanging. Now tell the court about what you experienced at your last one.
The warrant officer thought they'd been broken.
Now you're back.
But they weren't.
He's got something which you can't, I mean, he has talent, certainly, and good intuition, but he has that enigmatic quality that you either have or you don't have and you can't acquire.
Working with Steve has been great, There's always that bit of a little bit of nerves before you start working with someone who's very well known.
How long can it take for a man to die from strangulation? Hanging there with his neck broken, but enough oxygen to allow conscious brain activity.
If you left him hanging there without hauling him back up again, it could take as long as 15 minutes.
When we come to Kathleen in this film, she is representing the families of 7 innocent victims who she feels connected to.
Andrea was fantastic. She has a very thorough process of preparation.
She's really quite scarily good and hard and focused and clinical.
So, your defense is not that you didn't shoot them, but that you can't remember shooting them. Is that how we are to understand it?
My lord, it's not for the accused to answer questions of law. I alone can answer questions such as those posed by my learned friend.
All of the South African people that came together, both in front of and behind the camera, were amazed by the power of the script.
I'm really looking forward to working with Dion. The 2 characters have a very, very interesting relationship. There's a part of fear that the warrant officer instills in Leon, but there's still there's also a father-son kind of relationship.
He certainly is involved all the way from when the young character comes in at a 19-year-old. He plays a big role in his life. He's even trying to grow a moustache like mine. He totally sees him as a father figure.
By the time he got to prison, I think the only person to look up to was that warrant officer.
He's at the court case because he wants to see how this guy holds up. What does he divulge? You know, once again, I'm there to make sure that he stays strong.
Mr. Labuschagne, please tell the court how you felt personally measuring Gibbon's neck when you'd gotten to know him so well and felt he should not be hanged.
I didn't feel anything.
How do you tell the story about somebody who at the same time kills people and is a victim?
You feel that pressure and you can portray it, and if you can, you want to portray it so well because you're doing it for your Africa, for your country.
It is an important story to tell, another South African story that I think we need to see.
It's a real eye-opener for both the South African people that were there and people all over the world.
You cannot ask a man to be both shepherd and butcher at the same time.